So I'm about to react to Bellular's first impressions of Final Fantasy XIV. For any 14 fans that don't know who Bellular is and why they should care, Bellular is a content creator, predominantly on YouTube, that runs 2 YouTube channels, one about gaming industry news in general. You should be subscribed to that one. It's great. It's like Philip DeFranco, except way more chill and just industry news. It does have a heavy slant towards things like earnings reports and obviously an impact on Blizzard because he's been a huge Blizzard fan. His second channel is on World of Warcraft, and there's a third channel that's a Clips channel. That's where this is. The link will be in the description below. And basically, he's tried moving into Final Fantasy XIV. Now, Bellular, as a content creator, has a team around him. They're building a game. He also has a team that helps him on YouTube, so it's a pretty big enterprise, much like somebody like Comic Storian. And it ends up being a pretty well-balanced approach. I appreciate how level-headed it is. I appreciate that he gives something an honest chance to finish the thought before he decides that he does not like something as a full concept. That includes new development systems when they get added to games like World of Warcraft. That includes letting them finish the thought if they say, hey, this is the first of several steps. Okay, well, let's get to the end before we just give up. And there is room for redemption should somebody be willing to earn it. Those are the things that I think of when I think of Bellular. Very level-headed, has things like lore posts, which have been a great storytelling device as they've partnered alongside what was going on in Classic at the time. It's just a really great approach, and like many WoW veterans, no matter how much he's given them the benefit of the doubt, he's incredibly frustrated right now, and the lack of content from the game has made it a great time to try jumping into Final Fantasy XIV. So let's give it a shot.
So I think the next thing to talk about is a game. It's another game. It's not World of Warcraft, but it is a game that I think a lot of World of Warcraft players have not been able to ignore, that we kind of can't ignore in a way.
What game might that be, Michael?
It may just be Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers.
It may
might just be that.
All right. Well, we're getting to this much earlier than I expected. Okay.
Yes.
So Matt on the right plays Final Fantasy XIV. Michael on the left, Bellular, has not. I believe he jumped in once before and didn't make it. Not an uncommon or unheard of story, especially when you talk about the narrative grind to jump in. Obviously, one of the things that can push people in right now is the free trials bigger than ever, the critically acclaimed, and that the base game, should you choose to move beyond that, a bunch of stuff is on sale at this exact moment, like 60% off. And if you're a WoW player and you don't want to play TBC, you have until 9.1, which is sometime off in like the summer.
So, all right, I'm going to kick it off with my thoughts and impressions so far. I have properly played the game for like 4 or 5 hours. I mean, to put it this way, I'm like level 19. I have just left Gridania.
Keep in mind the experience at this point, if he is level 19, means that you have well out-leveled MSQ. So while you are level 19, it is possible that he has not played his first dungeon. That is not uncommon for any new players out there, especially if you're not logging in every day, so you've got rested experience, you're doing any at all side quests, such as your class quest, which you should be doing, other side quests which you don't need to be doing, you're doing your hunt log when you're out in there, maybe at some point somebody talked you into doing Hall of the Novice, or pre-ordering Endwalker, or something like that, so you've got added experience items. Maybe you're playing on a new server, so you have the Road to 70 buff, maybe you're remembering to put food, so you have an increased buff there. It is very, very, very easy to massively outlevel the main storyline, MSQ as it's called, and that is required to get to content in this game. So you end up doing content that's way lower level than you very, very fast if you stick to one job.
That's where my character is. So I did like the little, you know, the initial arc, starting off as an archer.
Yep.
So I have a few different thoughts. I guess the first thing I want to talk about is look and feel.
Yeah.
Immediately, Final Fantasy XIV does not feel great if you're used to World of Warcraft because you have acceleration on the character movement, right? So you hit the W key in WoW, your character goes psh, instantly. You do it in Final Fantasy, there's a little curve. There's like a ramp up to your speed. That, or at least it feels like that.
It's the animation, not speed.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
There's something about it. It just doesn't feel as snappy and reactive as WoW does to me.
It's the thing where you will figure that out very quickly if you go in and start like tapping A and D repeatedly, or if you go to a fight. I'm pretty pretty sure there's literally zero acceleration.
Interesting.
Because I've never felt it.
So just the animation then.
The animation is drastically different between games. Drastically different. World of Warcraft back in the day, you used to strafe to manually update your server location. It was a way of pinging the server faster. So if you wonder why when you watch me play games to this day, I do not have the ability to turn based on keyboard keys, that comes from a time when strafing was the preferred method of movement in World of Warcraft. And so that's a drastic difference. The aesthetic style is a huge driver of how the animation looks. In panels, talking to original WoW devs, when asked why they went with an appearance that Final Fantasy fans often compare to something being cartoon-like. It's not as cartoon-like as something cel-shaded like Borderlands, but it's definitely more on the cartoony end of the spectrum versus something like Final Fantasy, Guild Wars, something like that. Obviously, we're still within the world of fiction. We have bunny and cat people, but it is more realistic in its appearance in the way it's rendered. As a general rule, I, of course, run around in a pig mascot suit because I think it's funny. And the reason for that was, at the time, the titan to beat in the room was EverQuest. There were big MMOs at the time, but what was considered big and successful was a very niche audience. And when they set out to do World of Warcraft, their goal was to be accessible to a wider appeal of people. They could not have predicted how good at that they would be. They could not have possibly seen the amount of success they were going to have in the early years. And one of the ways they wanted to make sure that from the get-go it was very apparent that this was not the MMORPG that other MMORPGs were, was they wanted to make sure that any screenshots, any gameplay footage from the moment that you played the game, watched the game, saw a clip of the game, anything like that, that you immediately knew there's something different here. To this day, they've kept that aesthetic, but they have increased polygon counts, so as much as it still looks cartoony, just know that newer zones have way more detail, are way prettier, view depth is increased. When you equip gear and you equip transmog, the cosmetic system of something that's much older, it becomes very apparent when that is a non-updated skin. It does not look good. And when you see now today, we have the ability to directly compare Classic and World of Warcraft on Twitch in the same directory, and they look very, very different. So it becomes apparent, as much as people think of it as simplistic art style, that they've actually learned to do a great deal within that art style given time. I think it's also allowed older zones to age a lot more gracefully than if they had aimed for as realistic as 2004 allowed. And then here we are in 2021, and you're just stuck.
Yeah, it's just the animation look.
Okay, I guess I'm sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm.
Hotkeys.
Yep.
Doesn't feel as tight as WoW.
It's not even close.
Yeah. So I think that's something, if they could fix that up,
okay, yeah,
it would be good.
So this is the thing, right? It's because of how the engine works. It's because of it all. I mean, you're completely correct, but everything is all of like the engine stuff running underneath is impeccable. Essentially, when you hit a button, it does register. It's just the animation, it going and come down.
Yeah, that's it.
And all that stuff means that it can be really awkward, but it is a good experience when you get into fights, and like really tight fights don't feel sloppy.
Yeah.
But actually looking at it feels it.
As I've got more abilities and went through my rotation a few more times.
Yeah. Macros are the exception to that. Macros can feel incredibly sloppy.
Yeah. It's feeling better to me now.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing is look. How does the game look? And that is an interesting one because they have one of the worst anti-aliasing problems I have seen. The only AA that's available is FXAA, and that basically just looks like a Vaseline smear on top of the game. So it looks terrible with FXA, with that on. Yep. And without it, I mean, the aliasing is just kind of insane. I think that their shadows, I think it's the color temperature of their shadows, actually, that I don't like. It's like the shadows are almost uniformly quite gray, and they're in like... Yeah, I feel like there should be more of a color cast to their shadows. So there's been like a whole bunch of technical and compositional issues that I've had with the starting content of the game that they do take a little bit to get over. And I think it immediately looks worse than World of Warcraft does because WoW is so stylized. Yeah. And what that basically means is in FF, I think you basically need to go and get reshade. Or something like that to get a good AA.
That's true. By going realistic, you have to go further You know, the art style of World of Warcraft lets them get by with a lot of things. You don't have to know exactly how the corner meets. You don't have to know exactly how the detail would meet, because the stylized, it lets your imagination fill in some of the gaps that are missing anyway. And so the textures on things, it doesn't immediately look wrong, even if it is. Another problem is that within our graphics settings, not having an add-on community supported means things like reshaders and all of that can only have so much feedback given to the devs, because we don't want to be super apparent about like, hey, I love that I'm playing this game against terms of service. And B, this is a game that runs on consoles. And so over the years, because it supports multiple platforms, even though at various times in Final Fantasy's history, the console has not been the weakest hardware, they have had to design the game knowing that it's going to run for a set of players across a huge variety, as opposed to World of Warcraft that supports only Mac and PC. And yes, they allow those Mac and PCs to basically be from the Stone Age, but they are only developing for them as opposed to inviting the PlayStation environment in. So I think that I wonder if that has an effect. I'm not a developer, but that is the first thing I think of when I think of appearances being limited. Is that they have talked about in dev panels how expensive it is to have to get another platform online when something like PS5 launches, and how expensive it is to release all of these assets to run on the number of different specs that the game should be tested and played on.
Implementation.
Yeah, I think it's the actual software is Reshade. I think there's Storm Shade and G Shade, which I think are pre-configured ones designed for FF by people. I've not tried them yet because I have a 4K monitor and only a 980 on my PC, so I want to play at 4K, which means I have graphics settings low all the time. But
it's a tricky thing where I actually feel like I really like a lot of their compositions, like their levels. They feel really good to run around in.
Yeah,
but I think the quality that is there is, at least in the Realm Reborn stuff that I've seen so far, which is basically just Gridania, it's kind of betrayed by technical engine problems that. Yeah. Some of them do persist that I've seen from your gameplay of Shadowbringers content, and that is kind of unfortunate. Now, that said, once I actually got through all of those initial things where the game didn't feel as snappy as well, it didn't look as crisp and stylized as well, I actually started to get into things. Oddly enough, that's where it started to humongously pick up the pace.
Yes.
So part of what will make it feel more snappy is when he starts getting things like combos, right, where an ability procs another ability, and so you see it pop up, you press it, and immediately does it. That off the global cooldown, where you're not actually waiting on a server tick, you press it and it goes. That will make combat feel snappier. As for comparing ARR content, it is the weakness of live service games. They have struggled from chronic, perpetual, uncurable success. And the downside of what should be a good thing is that they have very, very old content that stays in game. The advantage of something like Assassin's Creed or God of War is that if they want to, every single time they release a game, they get to wipe the slate clean. They get to move into all new assets, all new canvas, and everything gets to hold up to the fidelity, the quality that's expected of the most recent entry into that franchise. He said some things perpetuate to Shadowbringers, but right now he is very distinctly in a Realm Reborn content. A Realm Reborn was a relaunch of a failed 1.0. That is something that Square Enix was very, very careful and very intentional about how much time and money they were willing to put into something that was trying to do something that commonly doesn't work. It is incredibly often for something to fail out of the gate, and if it fails once, it's going to fail again and again and again. And so putting money into something, betting that, hey, if we try to do the exact same thing, we'll get a different result, is something that they were very limited and very careful on. Now, if they could look into the future and see Shadowbringers and Endwalker on the way, obviously ARR may have looked very different. It may have been 6 months or a year later, and it may have had a lot of things that still to this day create problems. Things like housing, armory chest space, the way the glamour system works, limitations of the combat system, limitations of squadrons, trusts, companions, the way we track achievements, the way we interact with each other, both on our server, off our data center, the way we balance our character creation. Obviously, we have 2 races that have been added to the game that can't even wear a huge number of the hats cosmetically. There are problems that persist out of 2.0. Anybody who says ARR is this perfect gem and did not at all create something that led to something as a problem down the road, even if at the time it was working exactly as intended, is simply not listening to developers or playing the game broad enough, because the artifacts of the 2.0 relaunch are there. We commonly refer to it as spaghetti code. It is a huge problem, especially graphically within the game, and they don't spend a bunch of time fixing it because they keep our patches on time. World of Warcraft has gone back and rebuilt huge underlying systems with expansions like Cataclysm, and with Shadowlands they rebuilt the new player experience, but as a result, right now they literally don't have new content to do. So you gotta pick your pros and cons.
And be interesting to me. So I'm trying to think of like what to do first. The 2.5 second GCD.
Yep.
Don't mind. It didn't actually piss me off that much, and I have played on your higher level bard. So having the higher GCD, but after, you know, whatever level your bard was.
Yeah, that was only 50 or something.
Yeah,
50,
so it's
50,
like you're
60
level,
something?
yeah, you're like level 50 or 60 bard. Yeah, the GCD doesn't feel mega great, but you're actually weaving instant cast things in between that.
Yeah.
And I think with the design of so many of the rotations, like I've been looking at the samurai one, because basically I'm only playing an archer / bard until 50, and then I think I want to go samurai with it. I feel like it should all work quite well. So on the gameplay front, I'm actually quite happy looking at the top end gameplay that I've seen. It also, like, just that they look like in-depth, interesting rotations.
I really wish we had time today to let you play like one of the Eden normal fights on my bard, because you would have loved it.
Yeah.
You also would have died instantly.
So I guess then to move into experience,
So that's going to be one of the problems of WoW creators that boost and go straight into normal and savage content, is they're going to have an enormous learning curve. Final Fantasy's dungeon and instance design is really unique compared to World of Warcraft's because of, in my opinion, one of the biggest factors is that we do not allow DBM. DBM is Deadly Boss Mods. It's a raid call-out add-on for World of Warcraft. It's existed in some form or fashion, many times a couple forms or fashions, for a long time. There are a lot of UI add-ons you can do to help make things going on with your character, things going on with other characters around you, things going on with the encounter itself, very, very easy to tell what's going on. And because of that transparency, it can be very easy to react correctly and quickly. And so the dungeon design has had to scale for how adept players are to reacting, how fast they learn things, how often they go without making mistakes. And so the content has gotten to the point where some of the top-end content, Mythic 15s, Mythic raids, things like that, are very, very hard, if not rarely done at all, without some form of DBM or raid call-out or somebody in your party having something, at least a weak auras, some add-on that's helping you track what's going on with your rotation, what's going on with your debuffs, what's going on with the boss, focus targets, other targets in your party, allowing for easier ways of moving around your UI for things like mouse over. The add-on community has changed this game, and the encounter design has responded to that. So playing the game without add-ons is actually not the pure experience, because the devs know about the add-ons and they've designed with them in mind. Final Fantasy, on the other hand, has said terms of service says no add-ons. That doesn't mean we don't have add-ons. That doesn't mean people don't use add-ons. But it is their goal for the game to be beatable on all platforms without add-ons. And so all of the ground effects and the boss mechanics are iterative in nature. We see things once and we immediately see patterns. I've seen that sort of color before. I've seen that sort of pattern before. I've seen something that looks like that. So even when we get new mechanics, they are very rarely truly entirely new. They are usually a build upon previous mechanics layered in a new and interesting way. And so usually as a long-time player, you don't die to something 1, 2, 3, 10 times without going, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, whether or not you can mechanically do that is based on your player skill, but we at least know why we're dying. And Delibram is a great example of a way to show us all new mechanics in an all new way. The near raids, all new mechanics in an all new way, and we learn and we adapt. People are better at the game today than they were in ARR. They adapt faster, so content has scaled with that. So a new player coming in and jumping straight into Eden on a class with off the global cooldowns that they don't know, don't be shocked when you die.
What happens whenever the anti-aliasing and the shadows and, you know, it feeling a little bit clunky at times.
Yeah.
Once you're through that, you have music that thus far I love.
Yeah.
I love, yeah. It definitely, at least the Gridania stuff,
Yeah.
So I've loved the music. And like just the vibe, the ambience, I think has been really nice, really successful. It feels cozy, basically.
Gridania specifically is gorgeous.
WoW has good music, but it is often true that music could be picked up and put in any other game. 14 music somehow captures the personality of the encounter and the place that you are, in a way that picking up Lahi out of Raktika and just dropping it in a forest from another game wouldn't be right. And so there's something about it that just catches the personality. It's one of the jarring things about mount music is that you get on an extreme mount and it plays the music from that extreme. And even if you like that song and it conjures up memories of that extreme, sometimes I'm like out in the world fishing and like heavy metal music comes on. That's weird. And so the music design in this game, it is shocking when we get nominated and don't win Best Sound Design. Sound design, unfortunately, as a category, also shares with things like bone crunching and, something that's more immersive, not necessarily just a music score. So I think that's one of the reasons it really struggles to compete against games that also maybe have combat noises that help you be more like in that moment. I think it's a tough category to win, but it is not shocking when we're nominated.
I've actually liked my Gridania experience quite a bit. That's been quite good. Mm-hmm. Narrative then is funny because I'm playing through A Realm Reborn, which everybody says is by far the worst content that this game has.
Yeah.
And I think if this game started off at the quality level that Shadowbringer seems to be, we would have a very different conversation right now, and I think WoW would be in a lot more trouble because I think this game likely has a large problem with attracting new players because they have to get through the content of A Realm Reborn, and people might suggest a boost to somebody, but it feels a bit weird to buy a game and then boost through the content. That does feel bizarre.
See, I was always thinking, okay, maybe you could kind of do some like ARR boost start Heavensward, and that might be good, but after playing Shadowbringers, I would say literally if you boost, you are ruining the game for yourself.
100%. So that's what I've heard.
I think it depends on what you want to get from it. I've talked on the subject at length. I think there are people that a boost is an appropriate solution for. The problem is you're having to make that choice blind and then live with the repercussions. And so you 200, 300, 1,000 hours in will probably know whether or not a boost was a good choice for you. I skipped story through ARR, and as a result, Heavensward and Stormblood, I skipped any scene that didn't make sense, which means I'm effectively a story skipper going into Shadowbringers. Shadowbringers, the devs said you could go into blind and have a good time, so I gave it a shot. I had a blast. Now I'm playing back through story, and I regret nothing. But that's because I'm here and I regret nothing, not because that was a promise. And so you have to make this choice on the front end that you're going to have to live with a really long time from now. There is an enormous percentage of college graduates in the United States that walk across the stage not happy with the degree they chose because they had to choose that degree 4 or 5 years prior and then have to live with that choice. And after they're a certain distance in, there's really no way to undo it without a huge amount of expense and time on their part. A boost is a very similar thing. Jumping to the end is hard, and the ask of you if you don't boost is hard. There's not a good door here. Redoing the new player experience is something that things like 6.1 and 7.0 are going to be the first time that they've had a clean and clear option to explore that. And while publicly they've said that's not their goal, I hope on the inside that they're at least having a handful of developers look into making it an option, because one of the problems with this game is they get somewhere and they design something and they only have the options that they baked in. So with Ishgard Restoration, for example, we rebuilt a city much in the way that World of Warcraft opened up the Encourage gates. At the time, they allowed people from different servers to come contribute. When that became problematic, they flipped a switch and it became server-only progression. That was immediately available because they designed both Plan A and Plan B. They implemented the plan that they thought was the better plan, but they had another backup just in case. And so having a new player experience, at least the base foundation of it laid in, knowing what would happen if we let people start in 6.1 or 7.0, not creating that on-ramp, even if you're not going to use it, feels like a mistake to me, because right now it's a hard ask to ask somebody to go through 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, soon to be 6.0 to catch up. And That's not going to get better when we're talking about 8.0, 10.0. It's not getting less. It's like saying one day you want to run a marathon and you decide at 20 that you don't want to, and then you wait until 30 and you don't want to. It's not getting easier. So at some point you have to just get up and hop in. And that's a huge ask of people who are just trying to sit down and play a video game.
And what I found so far as I've played the game, actually paying attention to the quest text, I could see the little, I was doing these seemingly disparate things helping people out in the forests of Gridania, but they all came together actually really quite satisfyingly.
Yeah.
And they came together in a way where I actually learned more about the world. More about the lore and the world building. And I really liked how I learned more about the big picture of things by doing small scale things in the world that came together to be more than the sum of their parts. So that led to a situation with me where I actually didn't mind the whole talk to this NPC, run over there, talk to that NPC, run over there, because I was starting to get engaged and trying to work out like the little mystery that was going on. And there's another thing there.
So, to show an example of why his view of ARR story is so different than mine, note that on his desk is a World of Warcraft Chronicle 1 and 2. He is not afraid to read. He is not afraid to be invested in lore. He has put out lore videos on World of Warcraft. Somebody that is in a position where story is something they're not afraid of being the content they actually look forward to, can adjust to ARR better than somebody who is specifically mechanically based. So today I had a lot of videos suggested from a number of WoW creators putting out their first impressions. As those vary, a lot of that's going to be what are they looking for in the time they spend in video games. And if story is not on that list, or it's very far down that list, it can become a lot to go through ARR because they're having to put time, which is something we don't get more of, and they're having to put time into something that they don't know if it's going to pay off. It's a huge amount of faith. If you could look into the future and say, I'll enjoy Shadowbringers, I think knowing you enjoy Shadowbringers makes ARR Heavensward Stormblood worth it. But what if you do Heavensward ARR Stormblood and you don't like Shadowbringers? Then why did I do all of this? And so if the payoff for you is located in current content, I think that's where a lot of what I will probably feel differently than him, but like respect his opinion, because what we want from games, at least historically for me, is just different.
Where the amount of XP that you get for those talkie quests is not trivial.
Not even, no.
So you actually feel completely fine to do those talkie quests because the game rewards you appropriately, which makes sense because the narrative that is covered in those quests is important narrative. So you get a proper. Somebody said, most important question: are you a cat girl? Yes, I think I'm a sun cat girl. Maybe moon
yes,
cat girl.
You're keeper
I
of
don't
the sun.
know.
Keeper of the sun, Mikote.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
I mean that's. I was thinking of going for like a dragon or something, but I could not make a character on Zodiark, so I had to go with an old, basically meme catgirl character that I created and did not touch at all. But you know what? I'm actually having fun thus far. Some other things then, I guess, that I've...
To new players getting in, our race change item in-game is called a Fantasia. You buy it with real money, but you get, I think, 2 free ones as you complete story. And so especially for free trial players, since we've added Viera and Rothgar and you are not available to create on a free trial account a Viera or Roth, just know that if your plan later is, I'm not sure if I'm happy with this character, or I want to change to a race that's not available to me, that you'll have that opportunity down the line, should you just stay the course.
I've liked the hunting log system that kind of promote, basically you go in, well, there's like 5 levels of the hunting log. Each one has got, basically it's just kill 4 of this mob, we will give you a little bonus of XP. Do all of that to complete 1 level of the hunting log, you get a larger bonus chunk of XP. And all it basically means is when you're running through the genre, like, oh, that mob there.
So hunting log for new players. You do not have to do this. The MSQ will give you more than enough experience. The hunting log, in my opinion, introduced you to going out in the world and looking to kill things. At the time, one of the better ways to level your alternate characters was fate trains. Going out and, for World of Warcraft players, completing basically these small world quests that pop up that are timed and everybody's doing them in big groups. That's not really how we level in ARR anymore. Not that it wouldn't be effective, but there are other ways that we use instead. And so I don't know that a hunting log needs to be done more than just for the achievements. You do run by them and you might as well, but like you definitely don't have to. I still have many of my hunting logs not done to this day. They drop off. They're not something commonly supported like into current content because honestly what they pushed players into isn't the content we push players into now.
I need that for my hunting log, kill it, done. And it's just like, that's something you could transplant into WoW and it would actually be quite cool and fun. No, I mean,
Chat's saying you have to do it to unlock some hunts later. One of the problems with doing it as you go, and the reason I'm saying you don't have to do it, is you're going to be able to fly later, you're going to one-shot things later, and if you don't come across every monster in a tier of a hunt log, you're not going to be able to promote to the next tier of hunt log. And so I'm just telling you, eventually, if the hunt log just isn't things you come across for anymore, you don't need to go out of your way to hunt those down.
it's not a big thing. It's just that it adds you. It's just like a little thing to be like, oh yeah, it's a nice little thing I can do as I level.
Also, that's a Realm Reborn thing that like that goes away at 50. Like it doesn't go on past 50. It's purely for like 2.x or whatever, and then they change it with more specific. There are big monsters out in the world that spawn every couple of days. Go do this with a group of people.
That's cooler for
which
like
is very different.
The hitting end game though.
It's extremely different and it replaces it. But the point is, it's still there, so you can still do it, and it does. Honestly, I honestly think a lot of the 2.0 world, I actually learned the names of like very specific places just because I've done the hunting log on so many different like classes now. So I have every job at least 30. And then only one up at 80. But it's just, I've done all of the early hunting log stuff. So I'm just going, oh, there we go. Like, I know, like you say, words like, well, I'm trying, now that I can't think of any examples, now that I've put myself on the spot, helpfully. But I'm just like, oh yeah, I have a rough idea where that is. I can click the map, click the teleport, go there.
I guess actually that's another thing. Teleport. This is a game you use teleport over the. As long as you unlock the Aether or whatever shard in a zone, you click on it, you pay some gil, you teleport there. So handy. It doesn't destroy the world or the story or anything like that. It works.
It does make the open world content not feel immersive compared to when flying is not unlocked in a WoW expansion at the beginning of the expansion, and it does not scale as a gil sync in the way it does in Guild Wars, where the amount that you pay is based on the distance you're teleporting and the level you are. And so it has a little bit of an effect, but it does not scale to that degree, and it does make parts of the world something we don't visit as often anymore, unless you play a broad spectrum of the game. Some people do, but there are huge portions of the player population that don't go into parts of some zones or some zones in their entirety once they've cleared them for the quests that they need. So I don't know that it's better per se. I would say it's just different.
In this game, it works in Guild Wars 2, so that's something worth thinking about. But there is a cheaper Chocobo taxi system you can use as well, so that was interesting. Fates.
Just in case anybody has never done the Chocobo Porter since they remember, that's basically ground flight paths from World of Warcraft, and then we stop using those eventually. I don't even know if they're still added to current expansions because I don't use them. That's such a callback that I hear new players reference, and I'm like, oh, I remember those.
Fates are basically just like little zone events, and I mean there were zone events while I was leveling up in a Realm Reborn content. That is above Shadowlands leveling content.
Yeah.
In theory, it's what the Threads of Fate system was going to kind of piggyback off of. It was going to make world quests available to leveling alts in zones. I opted a character into Threads of Fate, and I regret everything about it.
Like, why is that not there?
Yeah, it's just a case of it was put there in the start and it keeps going. And because you can play every job on a character, people will just go, oh yeah, I've got I've got rogue at like level 2. I might as well
That's
play a
actually
little bit.
another thing too, that I can play different jobs on.
So I actually disagree that it was just put there and continues to be supported, because there's things that are just put there that we want supported that are not. Aggie Glamours is the most recent hot topic about it, but there are plenty of things put in the game that we drop support for. Deep Dungeon is one this expansion that just got dropped. Not because players didn't want it, but because the devs thought it wouldn't be that big of a deal to drop it. They've since come back and said, oh my gosh, so sorry about that. We'll try to bring that back, but not as a promise. Hildebrand. And so there are these pieces of content that it's that Fates served a good job. They did a good job doing that thing. They breathed life into the zones, and then they have iterated on them. This expansion, we have 2 forms of iteration on top of what he is experiencing as Fates coming out of Gridania. The first is bicolor gemstones. That is a currency locked behind Shadowbringer's Fates that lets you go to vendors and spend them. Very cool. It helps build on what Fates were already doing, and that's a new thing to Shadowbringers. The second thing is that our Relic grind has moved over expansions, which is our legendary. It takes place in a zone called the Boston Southern Front, and now Zadnor, much like World of Warcraft's The Maw, with some different rules around it, and it has basically fates in it that are called skirmishes, which spawn boss fates called critical engagements. And so we have taken the fate system as a base tool, and because it was good at its job, it's stuck around and it's grown. Not everything in this game that's added is like, well, we did it, so now we're committed. They are more than capable of dropping support for something, even when some players want that thing.
On my same character. That's great, because like I'm doing this character, it is an archer, it will turn into a bard. I'm going to hit level 50, unlock samurai, probably go over to that. Great. That's really cool. As I really like that. So there's that. There's the fates, which I really liked.
That's it? It just cuts off. Oh, I love clips channels. Oh, Bellular, thank you for that outro. And that's Fates, which I really like. Boom. I tried no outros for a while because at the time YouTube was penalizing you for having a portion of the video at the end that nobody watched, and so the outro everybody just leave. And so I tried just being like, and that's all I think, and then cut. It actually did what it was meant to achieve. It pushed watch percentage time up, but it ended up, it comes and goes based on how I'm feeling. That is such a funny thing. That's such a funny way for that to end. I am really excited for Bellular to get into this game. I am really excited for him to bring this perspective to it. He is very balanced. He is very open-minded. He has somebody with him to tell him, hey, this thing that might be abrasive gets better. That is something that is a huge gift to any new player. If they're not liking something, to know, is that a thing I need to grow used to, or is that something that I can ignore and it's going to get better? Just being able to emotionally kind of set the expectations around what the reality is going to be as you put tens, 20s, hundreds, possibly thousands of hours into this game. That's a really, really kind gift to have early on. And I'm really glad that he has kind of that Sherpa to guide him through that. There's 2 more of these. I'd love to watch them and react to them on stream. If they end up with engaging content like this, then I'll put them right here as a form of reaction video. Hopefully I'm getting better at these. I am trying. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Because the whole goal here is just to do anything about gaming, kinda.